Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another show of Second Opinion with Dr. Dua Hassan. Dua is a physician at Boston Children's Hospital and a former clinical instructor at the Stanford University of Medicine. We are going to be continuing today our After Birth series where we talk about some of the medical care that babies receive after they're born. So, Dua, what do you have for us today?
So today I thought we would talk about another one of the early interventions that we do, which is the vitamin K shot.
Tell me about vitamin K.
Yeah, so this shot is given a few hours after birth, and we give it because it prevents a devastating bleeding disorder, vitamin K deficient bleeding. And so, uh, it's something that as soon as the baby comes out, we give to the baby. And I think a lot of parents are often wondering why are we doing the shot? Should we do the shot? And so I thought it'd be worth it today to talk about. And I think of all of the interventions that we do early on, this is perhaps the most important.
Really? Okay, so that's interesting to hear because when I hear vitamins, I think, like eating my Wheaties. And this is another one of those things that, so I have three kids. As, the kids are born, there's this kind of parade of like shots and checks that they do. And I know vitamin K was in there, but I had no idea that it was actually this useful. Talk to me about what the vitamin K shot does.
Yeah, so the vitamin K shot, we've sort of been doing it for a while. We've been administrating it since the 50s to 60s, and then in the 60s, it became universal. And the entire idea behind the vitamin K shot is vitamin K is a really important factor for something called coagulation. So we have coagulation just means your body's ability to clot. And so we have a really complex system for clotting, and vitamin K is a required part of that. If you don't have vitamin K, then that system doesn't work. And when your body and your blood is not clotting appropriately, then the blood, the opposite of clotting, it bleeds. And so then you can have a lot of bleeding in places where you don't want bleeding to be, like the brain, for instance. And so that's why it's really important to make sure that we have sufficient vitamin K levels in our body. For babies in particular, we think of vitamin K deficiency in bleeding in sort of like three buckets. So there's early vitamin K deficient bleeding, which happens in the first 24 hours of life. It can happen. It's not very common. It's pretty rare. Sometimes it happens if mom is on certain medicines like anticonvulsants, but usually it's something we worry about, but not the most common form of bleeding actually. The most the two more common forms of vitamin K deficient bleeding is what we call classical, which happens in the first week of life. For babies who are not given vitamin K, that happens in, the literature varies, but can happen in as many as 1 in 60 babies that are born. So
Whoa.
can be pretty prevalent. And then there's the late vitamin K deficient bleeding, which happens up until 6 months. And this happens, according to the CDC, in about 1 in 6,000 babies who don't get the shot. And this version in particular is most strongly associated with the bleeding in the brain. We call that intracranial hemorrhage. And obviously, bleeding in the brain can cause a lot of really bad long-term outcomes and can be neurologically devastating for a baby. And so that's why vitamin K shots are given to the baby on the first day of life, sort of to prevent those three windows of bleeding.
Wow, I had no idea that vitamin K was preventing a 1 in 60 shot of not cranial bleeding, but bleeding like that. That's incredible. Is this one where you see a lot of parents having hesitations in your experience, or is it more common to be accepted?
You know, I find that people generally decline everything or want to do everything. They don't
Mhm.
really think through the different things, if that makes sense. So,
Sure.
like you mentioned, James, we had a previous podcast about the Hep B vaccine, and we'll have another one in the future about the erythromycin ointment. But those three are usually given together: the Hep B, the erythromycin, and the vitamin K. And so people just decline all three.
Mm,
And what I will often do, just because I think of the three, the most important, I think they're all important, but the most important is a vitamin K shot, is I will essentially give up on the other two. I mean, because usually people who decline they're like very strongly, we don't want to do anything. And I
mm.
will really, really hone in on the vitamin K shot. And I find that when I kind of decouple it from the other two, a lot of the people who say no, I sort of capture those people and they'll say yes. So that happens a lot. And then sometimes when a baby's being born, and the delivery is particularly traumatic, they'll have the pediatrics team come in.
Mm.
And so usually I don't like to talk to, I mean, as a mother of two who's gone through labor, I don't try not to talk to the moms about, medical things as they're laboring or right after labor. But this is one of the very few times where I'll do that. If I go to a delivery, it was traumatic, the baby's head got stuck,
Mm.
mom is pushing, which is a form of trauma. The baby's stuck in the vaginal canal and mom is pushing, that's a form of trauma on the head.
Mm.
So these are all things that can increase your risks for bleeding. So,
Mm.
if I'm in the delivery room and it's a traumatic birth, in that sense, and mom has declined the vitamin K shot, I will always go to the bedside afterwards and say, look, you felt it, I saw it. That was a really traumatic birth. You got to give your baby the vitamin K shot. And I find doing those two strategies, actually almost everyone who declines ends up giving it.
Sure. I mean, when you talk through the reason to do it and common um how common it is, it feels obvious that you understand why it was made universal, right? Like in 60, like that's like two or three, elementary school classes. Beyond the pain that's caused by giving a tiny baby a shot, are there any side effects to vitamin K?
Yeah, I mean, the most common side effect is what you just said, a little bit of pain, maybe a little bit of redness or tenderness. And
Mm.
that's sort of very similar with any shot. Another common side effect or potential side effect that we always talk about when we give any type of vaccine or shot is there's always a potential for anaphylaxis, which is a severe allergic reaction. And actually, when it comes to the vitamin K shot, anaphylaxis is not only rare or extremely rare, it's extremely, extremely rare. In fact,
Mm.
since we started giving it since we started doing it routinely in 1961, from then until now, we've only had one case of anaphylaxis. So we're routinely giving
Wow.
it to all these newborns, and we only have one recorded case according to the CDC. So it's essentially side effect free.
Wow. All right.
Yeah, and so like the question obviously is like why do so many people decline it? And
Yeah.
that rate is rising. And I find that oftentimes people kind of have two reasons. One is they're like, if this was important, Mother Nature would provide for it, sort of thing. Like, if we need vitamin K, the baby would have it. And I think that that's sort of a fallacy of evolution. Like, evolution doesn't necessarily account for rare catastrophic events, right? Like, you can have a situation where vitamin K deficiency causes really bad bleeding in 1 in 60 or 1 in 100 babies, and it still isn't necessarily something we would evolutionarily adapt against.
Mm.
So sort of those rare catastrophic events are not things that we are necessarily evolving to avoid. I
Mm.
think the other big thing is like, you know, adults don't get vitamin K shots, so why does the baby need it? And,
Mm.
adults get vitamin K from their diets. Vitamin K is actually not transferred in the breast milk. Very, very
So wow.
low amounts go through breast milk. And the other thing actually that's very interesting from a historic human standpoint is that we actually have bacteria in our guts that create and make vitamin K. So it's
Mm.
our diet, but also our gut bacteria. And historically, humans lived in very unsterile environments. So even a
Mm.
newborn that was breastfed would be colonized by different bacteria. But nowadays, our environment is so sterile, especially for babies and newborns, that they're not being colonized at the same rates. And so they don't have that sort of gut vitamin K generation. And that's
Mm.
part of the reason why the shot is so important.
That's crazy. That's so cool. Thank you for walking us through that. Well, thank you for walking us through that. As always, if you have questions or comments, leave them below and we'll try to answer them maybe in a future episode. And thank you, Dr. Dua, for teaching me about the vitamin K shot.
It was great to be with you, James.